Have you ever opened your eyes one morning and realized that the world no longer comes knocking at your door? No phone calls from coworkers, no meetings waiting for you, no one asking if you can lend a hand. That was Robert's reality last Tuesday. He is 71, newly retired after 4 decades in supply chain management. He brewed his own coffee, sat in the chair by his window, and stared at the quiet street outside. It was the same street he used to leave behind before sunrise as he rushed into another long workday. What unsettled him wasn't the silence. It was the sudden feeling that he no longer belonged anywhere. Here's the truth no one prepares you for. Retirement doesn't just take away your schedule. It can strip away the invisible network of people and routines that gave your life structure. Not your value, not your wisdom, but that web of connection that once made you feel anchored. But emptiness is not the end. It can be the beginning of something rich and meaningful if you are willing to look in new places. So stay with me, because what I'm about to share might help you rediscover what you didn't even realize you were missing. And if you feel this message reaching you already, do me one small favor, tap the like button so I know this story found the people who needed it most. Number 1, the world has changed. The old communities are gone. There was a time not all that long ago when Sundays were not for sleeping in or scrolling through headlines. They were for showing up, to church, to pancake breakfasts, to VFW halls and union gatherings where people not only knew your name, they knew your cousins too. Back then, belonging was simple. You didn't have to search for it. You just walked through the doors, shook a few hands, and you were part of something larger than yourself. But the landscape has shifted. Robert tried returning to his old Baptist church in Cleveland last fall. He smiled at the usher, slid into his usual seat near the back, and waited. He quickly realized it wasn't the same. Half of the familiar faces were gone. Younger folks slipped out as soon as the service ended, earbuds already in place. There was no coffee hour, no potluck list on the bulletin board. Just a quick nod and a rush to the parking lot. It's not that people don't care anymore. It's that the old forms of gathering, the lodges, the service clubs, the bowling leagues no longer hold us together the way they once did. And for many like Robert, it's not about drifting from faith or politics. It's simply that the places where you once belonged no longer feel like home. And let's be honest, starting over isn't easy. At 70, walking into a new group can feel intimidating in a way it never did at 30. You wonder, do I belong here? Will anyone notice me? Am I too old for this? But here's the shift that matters. Community today does not always arrive dressed in robes or meeting minutes. Sometimes it looks like something much smaller and more surprising. A watercolor class in the basement of the senior center. A hiking group that gathers at the Metro Park every Saturday morning. A corner of the library where half a dozen older men meet twice a month to trade stories of the years when gasoline cost less than a quarter. That is still community. It may not smell like incense or styrofoam cups of coffee anymore, but it carries the same heart. People showing up, being seen, being heard. So if the places where you used to belong feel unfamiliar now, don't blame yourself. The map has simply changed. Maybe it's time to draw some new roads. Coming up next, we'll talk about how to rediscover your tribe. Not the one you left behind, but the one that's still out there, waiting for someone just like you. And before we move on, let me ask you this. If you've ever walked back into an old space and realized it wasn't the same anymore, type "I understand" in the comments. I want to know how many of us share that experience. Number 2, finding your tribe again. Where do you begin? Once the potlucks have faded, the neighbors have moved away, and the church bulletin feels more like an obituary column than an invitation. The good news is that your tribe is still out there. They may not look exactly like the ones you remember, but they are waiting just the same. Sometimes they are serving soup in a church kitchen on Tuesday evenings. Sometimes they are walking dogs at the animal shelter. Sometimes they are swapping gardening tips at the senior center over lukewarm coffee. The setting does not matter nearly as much as the feeling of belonging you experience when you are there. Edward, 75, Discovered this when a neighbor invited him to volunteer at a downtown meal program. At first he showed up quietly, keeping to himself, but he noticed that the same men were always there. They laughed about the mashed potatoes. They whistled while they worked, and little by little, they became his friends. Soon they were calling him Sarge, a name he had not heard since his Air Force days. And for the first time in years, Edward felt like he belonged. James, 72, felt lost after leaving the Methodist church he had attended all his life. Then his granddaughter convinced him to join a story circle at the library. On his first night, someone asked about his most embarrassing high school memory. Without missing a beat, James described how he tore his trousers climbing a fence to impress a girl. The whole group laughed, not at him, but with him. Now he never misses a meeting. These are not just hobbies. They are lifelines. And they often begin with something small: a book club, a breakfast group at the diner, a Saturday photography walk in the park. You don't have to be the loudest person in the room. You only have to be present, willing to return again. The truth is, you may not find the perfect group. Sometimes you build it, one familiar face and one cup of coffee at a time. Show up twice, even if the first time feels awkward, because someone out there is waiting for you to say the first hello. If you've been nodding along while listening, maybe this is your nudge. It's time. Time to risk one small hello in exchange for a dozen meaningful see you next weeks. Up next, let's talk about how those tiny gestures, the nods, the glances, the small invitations can slowly blossom into bonds that carry real weight. Number 3, from a handshake to a lasting bond. We imagine friendships forming in big moments, but in reality, they usually begin with something much smaller: a nod, a glance, a handshake. And what matters most is the willingness to show up again. Connection deepens when someone remembers your name, then your order at the cafe, then one day asks if you will be back next week. That is how friendships grow, layer upon layer, until you realize you are no longer alone. George, 69, lost his wife and spent 2 years avoiding company. Then his daughter convinced him to join a walking group. The first time, he stayed on the edge, silent. The second time, someone joked about being the slowest in the group, and George laughed. The third time, he carried a thermos of coffee to share. Now he is the one who brings muffins, and the group would not feel complete without him. But showing up is only the beginning. What makes a bond last is opening up, even just a little. At one men's coffee circle, they had an unspoken rule: share one honest thing before your second cup. It could be a childhood memory, a fear, even a simple truth. Slowly, those small offerings stitch the group together. You don't need to pour out your soul. You can start with the light things, grumbling about the weather, joking about your hearing aids. But eventually, when you share something real, you move from being just another face in the room to being truly known. And sometimes all it takes is an invitation. One man told me he felt like he belonged again, not because of the group itself, but because someone leaned over and said, "Would you like to grab a coffee after this?" That simple question was enough to remind him he was seen. So give any group at least a few chances before you decide it is not for you. Share something small and genuine, and do not wait to be asked. Be the one who says, "Same time next week." These small choices, handshakes, questions, honest words are the bricks that build something lasting. Number 4, community doesn't have to wait for someone else to build it. Not everyone thrives in a crowd. Some people love walking into a room full of strangers. Others prefer connection that grows quietly. Both are valid. The truth is, you don't need to wait for the perfect group to appear. Community can begin with just one other person. A neighbor who joins you for a walk around the block twice a week can be the seed of something much larger. Over time, one person brings another. Someone carries a thermos of coffee, and suddenly you have a walking circle that feels like family. Harold, 73, discovered this when he pinned a note on the bulletin board at his community center. Vinyl listening hour Fridays at 3. Bring a record. At first, only one man came, then three, now, 4 years later. 8 men gather in Harold's garage twice a month to share music and stories. Harold never set out to create a movement. He simply opened a door, and people walked through. If you are comfortable with technology, you can use tools like Meetup or Facebook groups. But remember, the point is not to stay online. The point is to move from the screen to real life, from typing to talking. The spark may begin online, but the warmth happens when you sit side by side. And do not let perfection stop you. 3 people laughing once a month can be more healing than 30 who barely know each other. What matters is presence, not numbers. So if you've been waiting for someone else to build the group you wish existed, maybe the someone is you. Not because you are the loudest voice, but because you are willing. Willing to put out 2 folding chairs, willing to call an old friend, willing to say, let's start small. Every circle begins with one person deciding they no longer want to be alone. Number 5. Friendship in the digital age, using technology wisely. Community no longer lives only in church halls, neighborhood diners, or quiet library rooms. In today's world, many doors to connection open through technology, and while that may feel unfamiliar to some of us over 60, it can be one of the most powerful bridges we have. The mistake is thinking that technology belongs only to the young. The truth is, it belongs to all of us, if we use it with care. Ruth, a 68-year-old widow in Kansas City, discovered this after months of long and lonely evenings. At her daughter's suggestion, she joined a Facebook group for widows. At first, she didn't post. She simply read quietly. Then one evening, she shared a single sentence. "First Christmas without him. Harder than I expected." To her surprise, within an hour, she had received messages of encouragement from a dozen women who understood. One of them lived just 20 minutes away. That simple post led to coffee, which led to weekly walks, which led to the kind of friendship Ruth thought she had lost forever. This is the promise of technology. It can shorten the distance between us and those who share our interests. A Zoom book club might begin with strangers, but after several weeks of reading together, people begin to look forward to those calls as if they were gatherings in a neighbor's living room. A hiking group you find on Meetup may begin with names on a screen, but it turns into a family when you are sharing trail mix halfway up a hill. The key is remembering that online tools should be beginnings, not endings. They are the invitation, not the full experience. Of course, many of us worry about safety online, and that caution is wise. The best way forward is to keep things simple. Use established platforms such as library-hosted Zoom events, Facebook groups connected to organizations you trust, or Meetup gatherings run by reputable community leaders. Share only what is comfortable your interests, your hobbies, your favorite books or shows, while keeping personal details like your address or finances private. If you decide to meet someone in person, always choose a public place first and let a friend or family member know. These habits allow you to enjoy the gift of connection without unnecessary risk. And if technology itself feels intimidating, remember that every skill begins with a single step. Local libraries, community colleges, and senior centers now offer free classes on how to use smartphones, video calls, or email. Younger family members are often delighted to help, and teaching moments can quickly become bonding moments. Many grandparents have learned FaceTime not only to see their grandchildren's faces, but also to be part of their daily lives again. What matters is not whether you master every new gadget, but whether you allow technology to serve as a bridge rather than a barrier. The warmth of friendship is not in the screen itself, but in what the screen makes possible, the voice you hear, the face you recognize, the plan you make to meet in person. A kind comment on someone's post, a shared memory, or a word of encouragement can ripple out in ways you may never fully know. For someone out there, your words may be the reason they feel less alone tonight. And if you've ever found a new friend through technology, a Zoom class, a Facebook group, even a simple email, type the word "online" in the comments. I'd love to know how digital tools have helped you connect. So if you find yourself scrolling tomorrow, ask this simple question: Could this be a step towards something real? Because often it is. Technology is not here to replace the human touch. It is here to guide us back to it. Number 6. Giving back. How service creates belonging. There is another path to friendship that has been with us for centuries, and it is both simple and profound. It is the path of giving. When we serve others through time, through skills, through listening, we do not only help them, we also rediscover ourselves. Many people think retirement means finally earning the right to rest. And while rest is important, what many older adults truly miss is purpose. Service offers that purpose, and in the process, it brings us back into community. Margaret, a 74-year-old retired teacher from Chicago, found this to be true. Her days felt long and empty until one afternoon, she noticed a flyer at the library asking for volunteers to read with children once a week. She hesitated, wondering if kids today would want to listen to someone her age, but she signed up anyway. On her first day, she sat beside a boy named Anthony who held a worn copy of Charlotte's Web. He stumbled over the words, but Margaret encouraged him gently, week after week. Soon, his mother approached her with tears in her eyes, saying he never wanted to read before. Now he practices every night. Margaret had gone in to offer her time, but what she received was more powerful. A child who looked forward to her visits and a circle of fellow volunteers who became her friends. Service does not need to be dramatic to be meaningful. Samuel, 79, began serving meals once a week at a downtown shelter. He thought he was just carrying trays, but he discovered that the people around him, both the volunteers and those being served, shared stories that mirrored his own. They laughed together, shared small triumphs, and even celebrated birthdays. Samuel often says, "I went there to hand out food. I came home with a family." This is what happens when we give. We are reminded that we are still needed, that our presence matters. We also find ourselves surrounded by others who care about the same mission, and that shared purpose forges bonds much faster than idle small talk. Even a single act of service, helping stack chairs after a community event, holding a baby at church, or checking in on a neighbor can shift the way we see ourselves. If you are unsure where to begin, opportunities are everywhere. Libraries and schools need reading partners. Hospitals and veterans' homes welcome visitors. Senior centers always need an extra hand. And sometimes the best place to start is right outside your front door, raking leaves for a neighbor, offering a ride to the grocery store, or delivering soup to someone who is ill. The beauty of service is that it reminds us the world still has a place for us, a need for us, a seat reserved with our name on it. By giving, we not only fill someone else's empty space, but also heal our own. If this part speaks to you, take a moment to hit the subscribe button so you don't miss more stories like this, stories that remind us of our purpose, even in the later chapters of life. So perhaps the next step for you is not just joining a group or starting a circle. Perhaps it is giving your time in a way that feels right. Because when we serve, we discover once again what it means to belong. And often we come home with far more than we gave away. Final thought. You are not too old to begin again, and you are certainly not too late. After a lifetime of giving so much of yourself to work and family, it can be easy to believe that your best years are behind you, but they are not. You are still becoming, still capable of laughter, still able to form bonds that matter. Albert, 76, told me he once woke up and realized no one needed him anymore. That emptiness could have swallowed him, but he chose to join a local storytelling group. At first he stayed silent. Then one night he shared a memory of his first summer job painting houses in the Texas heat. The group laughed and leaned in. They reminded him that his voice carried weight. Now he tells a story every month, not because he craves attention, but because he has found himself again. That is what community does. It restores the parts of us that go quiet. It reminds us that we are still valued, still needed, still capable of lighting up a room. So do not wait for the perfect moment. Take one step, call a friend, sign up for a group, mark a date in your calendar, make room for connection, Because connection rarely waits until you feel ready. It appears when you make space for it. You have carried so much through the years with strength and dignity. Let this chapter be the one where others carry you too. In conversation, in laughter, in belonging. You are not finished growing. You are not finished mattering. And the world is quieter without your presence in it. So tell me this before you go. What is one small thing you will try this week to bring connection back into your life? Share it in the comments. I do read them, and I do see you. And if this message touched you, please like the video, subscribe, and share it with someone else who may need to hear it. Because here, in this space, we are building something together, and there is always a seat saved for you.